Following on from my earlier video where I unveiled the DPS calculation in the division, may I present to you the long form version of that same video. This one is peppered with huge amounts of detail and my opinions. I hope you're ready for it, guys. Stick around. What's up, guys? Welcome back. It's Vesp here from skillup.gg. Today we're going to be taking a very detailed look in fact, at the DPS formula and how it affects you. Much like my previous video on the top 10 DPS stats ranked, I did a short video on this topic yesterday, which covers all of the same content that I am about to cover now, but in a lot less detail. This video that you are watching now is very long and is very detailed, so if you're keen for just the key facts, then be sure to follow the link to that short video now, as I'm sure you'll enjoy that a hell of a lot more. Regardless, I put a huge amount of work into this video. Like, I won't tell you how many hours I've spent staring at spreadsheets and YouTube clips and all this sort of stuff over the last few weeks. So if you find this video useful, then please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe, because it really does help me out in a very big way. And with that, let's get started. Now, before I get into anything, I need to be really clear and offer a very clear caveat at the front end of this, saying that everything I'm about to say is a theory based on the testing that I have been able to do. I am not in any sort of alpha or beta build, which means that the analysis has been conducted by using footage that I took off my character sheet and gameplay footage, as well as trying to collect gameplay footage from other YouTube clips. It's notoriously difficult to find YouTube videos that show everything that I need to see and test this formula properly, so the test data I'm working with is very limited at this point. However, I think the logic behind it is all sound and you know, to the point where I'm willing to go public with this and share it with you guys. So for now, take it with a grain of salt until the devs release an official statement on what this calculation is, or until we can get into the live game and do much more extensive stress testing. But for now, yes, this calculation does work, and I have been able to successfully model near accurate DPS results multiple times. So with that out the way, let's get started. So what is DPS? Well, ideally, DPS is a representation of the amount of damage that your character is likely to dish out every second. Now, as is the case with most games, this isn't to say that every single second you will be dishing out exactly the same damage. Rather, it's an average of your total damage as measured over a certain time frame. It requires a numerator, which is your damage, and a denominator, which is the time your damage is measured over. As in most other games, your actual damage per second will vary greatly based on things like crits and headshots and buffs and skill usage and so on. But that's what DPS essentially is trying to say. How much damage can you typically output over a certain span of time, broken down into 1 second intervals? Okay, so let's start by filling in this formula for the division. Let's find out our numerator and denominator, and bear with me because you're going to be very surprised by what goes into both of them, and they're going to have a very big impact on the way that you gear your character. So the base of our DPS calculation is damage per bullet, and let me begin by saying that this is not easy to calculate. Per bullet damage is not what appears on your character sheet as weapon damage. Oh, that it were. I believe that the value that you are seeing there is your base weapon damage multiplied by your firearms stat. So the firearms stat is one of your core stats along with stamina and skill power, and it buffs your base weapon damage by 1% for every point in firearms. So if you have a weapon that does 100 damage and you have 100 firearms skill, your weapon damage on your character sheet is now going to read 200. Simple stuff. The next thing we add to this number is any percent weapon damage increase we get from our magazine mods. Now in the beta, I managed to find a few of these things that straight up buff weapon damage by X%, and this is calculated based on your base weapon damage, not your firearms buffed damage. So in the example above, if you applied a 10% bonus damage magazine to your 100 base damage weapon while you had 100 firearm skill, the increase would be 10 damage and not 20. This 10 damage is added to your weapon damage total, which is your per bullet total, and that's the next part of, you know, what comprises this per bullet damage calculation. So the final thing that buffs your per bullet weapon damage is the bonus weapon damage that you get from your gloves, and this is a straight up addition to your existing weapon damage. So if your buffed weapon damage is 210 and you have a pair of gloves that give you an extra 20 damage, you are now going to be doing 230 damage per bullet. Now this gets us to our per bullet damage. On your character sheet, you will see this value called weapon damage. From what I can tell, this is simply the base weapon damage plus firearm stat the percentage weapon damage bonus and plus weapon damage bonuses are then added to this to create your final bullet per damage. So this is everything that goes into that calculation. And to be clear, this number is then used by the DPS formula for everything else. So it's a really important number to understand. And the one thing I would say about this at this point is that buffing this number is really your number one priority. If you've watched my top 10 DPS stats ranked video, you'll see that these percentage damage increase magazines and plus weapon damage gloves are the best damage boost you can get. And I thought that even before I fully understood the DPS calculation. And now that I understand the calculation fully, I can tell you that these stats are even more important, and we'll come to that soon. So far we have one element of our damage in play, which is our per bullet damage. Cool, fine. But what do we need to add to that to get a complete numerator? Well, the first thing is the value of critical strikes. So in the game, there are actually two crit stats. The first one is critical hit chance, which is how likely is it that you'll crit when you fire a bullet. And secondly is your critical hit damage, which is when you do crit, how much bonus damage is applied. Now these numbers are very easy to see and understand as we can view them in our character sheet and add or remove mods to change these values. The way we math the value of these things in the formula is to say critical strike chance times by critical strike damage times by your per bullet damage. So this is essentially saying that every bullet has a certain percentage chance to apply a certain amount of your total per bullet weapon damage as bonus damage. We then add this value to our per bullet damage to find the second part of this mystery numerator. So what's next? Well, in this game, headshots are not crits, they are headshots, which apply their own type of bonus damage drawn from the bonus headshot damage stat we can see on our mods and on our character sheet. So this is basically saying that when we score a headshot, you'll do an extra amount of bonus damage based on your per bullet damage times your bonus headshot damage. Simple stuff, right? Except it absolutely is not at all. So the first thing I discovered when testing this was that the value displayed on my character sheet didn't line up with the actual increase I was seeing in game. So here you can see me score a headshot of 931, but my per bullet damage is only 532. And my character sheet reads that I have 50% bonus headshot damage. But just then I did a 75% bonus damage, and to be clear, I did not have the pulse bonus active, which grants you an extra 26 bonus critical damage. So at this point, I'm going to assume that this is actually bugged and the value isn't displaying correctly. So for the purposes of my calculation, I took the actual in-game value rather than the visible value on the sheet. So here we've already learned something useful about this the deceiving nature of this headshot stat, and that is that it probably is bugged at this point. So now here's when things get really, really interesting, and this is what really blew my mind when I finally managed to figure this out. If I have 0% crit but add crit hit damage mods to my character, my DPS does not go up because I have no chance to crit, so that stat is actually totally wasted, and that makes perfect sense. If, however, I add a mod to my gun that increases bonus headshot damage, you'll notice that my DPS goes up. Now this can only be the case if one of two things is occurring. Number one, that the game has maybe baked in a base headshot chance into its calculation, which is essentially guessing that, say, 20% of your shots are headshots, right? So that's option one. Option two is that the game is using another stat to determine headshot chance, and it will multiply damage based on that stat. So those of you that are really following closely may now be guessing what I eventually arrived at, which is that accuracy, the mystery stat that was for some reason buffing our DPS where our stability was not, it's not just a stat that determines our reticle spread, it's a stat that is used by the DPS formula as a value for how likely it is that you're going to land a headshot. I tested this extensively, and while the values aren't exact, they're always in the same ballpark of around 1 accuracy equals around 0.9% headshot chance. Though again, I suspect that there's some either rounding errors or some bugs here. So now I want to point out here that the accuracy stat that you see on your character sheet isn't just your accuracy rating. I'm fairly certain that it's a combination of both your accuracy and your hipfire accuracy, since hipfire accuracy mods also increase your DPS on your character sheet, but this value isn't reflected on your list of stats. So I'm fairly sure that they're folded up together somehow to create this accuracy value, but that, you know, the weighting of those is different. So I don't think it's 50% accuracy and plus 50% hip fire accuracy equals your total accuracy. I think it'd probably be something like 75% accuracy, 25% hip fire accuracy, because it's a hell of a lot less likely that you get a headshot while you're hip firing. So anyway, taking a step back about it, if I'm right about this, I have to say, first of all, well played, Massive, well played. This is definitely some very cheeky and ingenious design here to get to this value. And I totally see why you've done it this way. You want the value of headshots to be reflected in this formula somehow in order to push your players towards gear that promotes prioritizing headshots. So yeah, tip of the hat to that one. But at the same time, wag of my finger, and that's a shout out to Colbert or anyone Colbert fans out there, but wag of my finger, because you know, this is just a little bit too cheeky by half. Essentially, what the game is saying is that your chance to get a headshot is equal to your accuracy rating. Now, obviously, this is not the case. Many things are going to determine the likelihood that you are going to land a headshot, from your distance to the target, to the type of enemy that you are fighting, to your chosen weapon, to your personal thumb skill. You know, to reduce all of these factors into a single value as represented by your accuracy stat is probably not the best way to go about this, in my very humble opinion. Regardless, this is how headshot damage is calculated. It takes your accuracy stat, it converts it into a chance to score headshot, and then multiplies that by your final headshot damage multiplier, whatever that might be at this point. As I said, that's still a little bit up in the air. So this gives us the contribution of our headshot damage to our per bullet damage. But what makes this even more complicated is that headshots can actually crit. So you need to add the value of headshot crits to your per bullet damage. The way that you do this is simply to do headshot chance times headshot damage times crit chance times crit damage times per bullet damage. Easy, right? So this gets us to the contribution of our critical headshots to our per bullet damage. And with these four things in play, we are now ready to calculate our numerator, which is our total adjusted per bullet damage, which in a very simplified formula looks like this. It's per bullet damage plus crit damage plus headshot damage plus critical headshot damage. And with that in place, it's actually now time to calculate our denominator, which is the period of time over which DPS is measured. In the case of the division, this value is actually what we call cycle time. So let's explain what that is and how it's calculated. Now, we know that the character sheet DPS changes when you add or change one of these stats: your rate of fire, your reload speed, and your magazine size. So from this, we can immediately infer that DPS is sustained DPS, since it's clearly taking into consideration the impact of how many bullets you can fire over a certain period of time and how long it takes to reload your weapon. We can actually add up the total impact of all of these things to arrive at our cycle time, which is basically, you know, your magazine dump time plus your reload time equals your cycle time. So reload time is actually really easy. It's right there on our character sheet. But how do we calculate our mag dump time? That's actually quite easy as well. On your weapon sheet, you'll see a value called RPM, which is rounds per minute. And this is how many bullets your weapon could fire if you didn't have to reload. So from this, we can determine how many bullets your weapon can fire per second by calculating your bullets per minute divided by 60, and that gets you to your bullets per second. So that's easy stuff. We can then take that value and figure out how long it takes to empty a magazine by calculating your magazine size divided by your bullets per second, and that becomes your magazine dump time. So when we have that, we simply add it to our reload time to arrive at our total cycle time, and that value is then used as the denominator for our DPS calculation. And in the end, it looks like this in very simplified form. It's per bullet damage plus crit damage plus headshot damage plus critical headshot damage times by your magazine size. And the reason for that is because we are using cycle time as our denominator. So we times all of those values by our mag size, and then we divide that by the cycle time to arrive at our final DPS value. And I think this is how it's done. I think this is how the calculation works. As I said, I've tested it and it all checks out. I've actually worked this into a Google Doc spreadsheet, so I encourage you guys to check that out and test for yourself. But look, I'm just taking a step back from that. There are two big issues with the way that I think this calculation works, and I think are actually quite counterintuitive and will probably lead people to making very bad gear decisions. So the first is the inclusion of accuracy stat as a means of measuring headshot likeliness. And I've already discussed why I think that isn't the greatest idea, but the basic issue is that, you know, for instance, people are going to be stacking lots of headshot damage bonus on their assault rifle and then not really aiming for headshots because, you know, assault rifles aren't great for that. There's a lot of recoil. And as a result, all of that bonus headshot damage that they have, you know, because it's being multiplied by an accuracy stat that they don't understand, they're not gearing correctly, right? So that's one issue. And the second issue is the inclusion of reload into this calculation, which I just want to touch on very briefly. So basically, I don't think reload's inclusion in this DPS calculation is all that great. I get that in PvE you are going to be reloading and you want faster reload times, and sure, even in PvP, there will be plenty of times when you'll be reloading your weapon and the extra few split seconds can mean the difference between life and death. But I think the live reality of all of this is very different than what the formula would have you believe. So generally, I reload at moments when it isn't opportune for me to be firing. Maybe I'm moving from cover to cover, chasing an enemy, whatever, it doesn't matter. But from playing about 40 hours across 2 different betas, I can say that there were very few occasions where I could just fire a full magazine into a target, reload it, and then continue to fire again immediately without having something interrupt that flow. I really don't need to know how long it takes to reload my weapon, especially given how quickly weapons reload in this game. But I absolutely need to worry about how much damage I'm outputting every second when I'm pulling the trigger. This matters, and it matters a lot in both PvE, but especially in PvP, where I actually don't want to be reloading at all. I simply want to be emptying one weapon and then switching to the other weapon and then switching to my pistol. And I want to completely avoid reload as much as possible because I want to get my opponent down before they have the chance to run away or heal, or their friends can come and help them, or whatever it is. So I don't think this should be included in the way that it is, and I don't think that accuracy should be substituted for headshot chance. So with that in mind, I'm proposing a different DPS calculation formula that I think makes much more sense and aligns with what I believe is actually going to be a useful estimation of your overall second-to-second combat effectiveness in both PvE, but especially in PvP. And that formula is as follows. It's per bullet damage plus your crit chance times your crit damage, plus your chosen headshot chance times your headshot damage, plus your chosen headshot chance times your crit damage, times your crit chance, sorry, times your crit damage. All of that is then multiplied by your magazine size, and then all of that goes over your magazine dump time. So here we've removed the automatic usage of accuracy as a substitute for headshot chance, and we're allowing you to manually input what you think your likely headshot chance is. So if you're using a marksman rifle in PvE, maybe you want to manually enter 60% headshot chance in that field, because that sounds realistic, right? You might be able to achieve that. But if you're using a shotgun in PvE, maybe you want to put 10% headshot chance into that, because it's really unlikely that you're going to be chaining lots of headshots when you are using a shotgun. So, you know, it's all up to you in terms of how you want to tailor that number, but it will reflect what you think is the actual number of headshots that you are likely to land when you are using that weapon. So the second thing that we've done here is we've removed your reload time. And yes, I know, and I fully understand why it is useful to include it. I get it. But I honestly just don't think it's all that useful in the vast majority of instances. I want to know my burst DPS. That's what I really care about, because when I shoot things, I want them to die before I have to reload. It's as simple as that. And I think this is probably a better way of looking at things in PvE, but it is absolutely a better way of looking at things in PvP. So now I'd like to put out a call for assistance, and it's the same call I made last video, which is, I'd really love to create a website that allows people to use this formula and calculate their DPS manually, but I have no web skills whatsoever, none at all. I've registered a domain name, which is www.divisiondps.com, and I'd really love for someone to help me build this calculator. It's going to be really quick and easy. It's just, black background with a Division logo at the top, some text, and then this calculator with the output. That's all it's going to be, but I'd really love someone to help me do that, because there's no way I could do that. So if you're keen on helping me out with that, please let me know. That would be really amazing. So guys, that's it from me today. It was a super long and super detailed video, I know, but I wanted to be really clear about what this formula is, how it works, and how I got to the point of understanding and how it affects you. It's a really funny formula, as I've said earlier. It's not straight up, and I think it's a little bit misleading at times. I think, as I said, there's a risk that people are going to make some bad gear decisions unless they fully understand how this formula works. So, you know, share this on your clan forums, share this on, you know, Twitter, on Facebook, or whatever else. Get the word out there. Make sure as many people know this as possible so that they can make the best, most informed decisions that they can when they're thinking about their gearing. Guys, if you liked this video and you found it useful, please give me a thumbs up. As I said, put a huge amount of work into this. It's been a crazy couple of weeks trying to sort of crack this nut. So if it's been useful, just yeah, as I said, thumbs up would be fantastic. And don't forget to subscribe. I'd love to see you guys around again. There are going to be plenty more Division videos. Obviously, we're just getting started here, and I cannot wait for the launch of the game. I think it's going to be really fantastic. So yeah, guys, thanks again, and stick around. And I really look forward to seeing you in the Dark Zone soon. Take care now. Bye bye.